Hi, it's Steve Rose, Center City Hypnosis. Today's clip will be about hypnosis and specifically the areas of enhanced communication skills, such as language patterns, body language, that sort of thing. Things that are designed to enhance communication between two people, build stronger rapport. And the reason I'm doing this clip now is because I recently had a great conversation with a brand new hypnotist who's just getting started. And one of the things we talked about was the topics of rapport building, building a closer relationship with clients and being able to communicate with them in a more effective way. And in the hypnosis field, there's a lot of emphasis on that kind of thing because hypnosis really, basically, is fundamentally all about communication and kind of specialized methods of communication and really focusing on enhancing certain areas of it. And it kind of relates to a blog post I did recently on my regular blog where I talked about kind of Borat the hypnotist. You may or may not have heard of Borat. He's from Kazakhstan. He was in a popular movie that came out a couple years ago. Borat's from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is it was a region of the old Soviet republics, but anyway, he's from out there, and in that movie, he travels to the United States with some crazy goal in mind. But one of his goals is to learn how to be a comedian in the United States, how to be an American comedian. So he goes to a humor coach, and this is like a real-life humor coach that he found somewhere. And he sits with the humor coach who teaches them certain techniques that are supposedly humorous. One of those techniques is sort of like a language pattern that is supposed to make people laugh, where basically you say something and then you add the word "not" to the end of that sentence. For example, I would like to break my leg, not, and that's supposed to be humorous because, obviously no one would really like that. And there's a really good scene in that movie where they just go back and forth and Borat keeps going, not at the end of certain sentences, but it's obviously better than me doing. But the point of that blog post was that I think a lot of times in the hypnosis field, people get caught up in that kind of thing, like thinking that those things are important when they're really not. It's like a lot of emphasis is put on that kind of thing, and so especially when people are learning, they can think that that kind of stuff is what they should be focusing on, when really that's just very tactical stuff that is not really what the purpose of interaction between two people should be. Tacking on little syntactical type of things or phrasing certain things a certain way. It's really unimportant in the end. It's more the intention of that communication and that interaction between two human beings that matters, not like some phrasing or whether or not you say something in a deep voice or a hypnotic voice, or whether you say something in a high voice. That stuff can matter, and it's good to get skilled in that stuff, but it's not really the area that I think should be so much focused on in this field. That's just my opinion. And that kind of relates to this. A lot of people are familiar with the idea of body language being an important thing to learn to observe, and some people have heard about things like magic and mirroring, where you kind of observe closely what the other person is doing physically. Like, for example, if you see them crossing their legs, they're supposed to cross your legs. If you see them crossing their arms, you cross your own arms, and that's supposed to somehow build a closer relationship between you and this person. Sometimes sales people are exposed to those kinds of techniques and encouraged to do those things. But the thing about that is, even though research has shown that when people are in sync that way, basically it's like two nervous systems that are in sync, and they actually do that unconsciously when they have very good rapport and good connection, communication is good between them. But the thing is, it's also been shown that if people actually make a conscious effort to do those things, that has a big risk of causing that rapport, that connection, to be damaged, to be lost. And my point there is that I think it's nice to study those things and to learn about those tactics and little techniques, but maybe even practice them. once in a while. But for example, if you're in an office setting with a client and your goal is to help the client solve a problem, your focus should be on what the client is talking about, what they're getting across, and that kind of stuff. It's just like if you could imagine if you're there with someone and you're just talking to them about something important to you, and then you notice that every time you scratch your nose, or they scratch their nose, and then you notice that they're like observing your eye movements closely to see which direction of the room you're looking in, and then you start to notice that they're talking in terms using strange language patterns like, well, you want to feel bad, not something silly like that. That would just make you kind of like recognize that something's off, even unconsciously. And actually, the research has shown that in laboratory settings, when they've done this kind of research, that when people have noticed that happening, and people can notice that happening, that the rapport is lost, and people actually have a worse, harder time actually moving forward then. So my point there is that I think it's great to learn about these techniques and maybe even practice them, and just for fun, that kind of thing, or to actually hopefully practice them so much that they become innate and unconscious, because that's what you really want, is to be able to do these things unconsciously. But trying to do those things with with real life clients where there's something at stake, that just kind of misses the mark, and it puts the emphasis on little techniques and stuff like that, instead of what what you should be doing with the client there. And the stakes are a bit higher when you're communicating with the client in that sense, because if in a lab, if they discover that the rapport is broken and the relationship's damaged, well, no big deal. It's like a lab assistant and a test subject in a laboratory setting, and that's interesting data in itself to learn that relationship's damaged. But in my view, personally, I think that's just too high of a risk to take. It's not worth taking, because anyway, if you have to do those things consciously, that kind of goes against the point of it anyway. And anyway, I think actually, if you just the fact that when these things do work, and if you do get away with those things, I think the reason they work is because if you're like paying attention to someone's body language or watching their eye movements and that kind of thing, if you're consciously doing that, all it is you're focusing intently on this other person, which helps to build that rapport. But the thing is, if they catch you doing that, even unconsciously, and they notice something is off there, something is not congruent, then that's just not worth the risk in my mind. So really, all you really need to do is focus intently on what they're trying to get across here, what the purpose of that communication is. So I hope this was a little interesting clip for you. Even though this may seem like it's directed more towards other hypnotists, which some of it is, I also work, of course, with a lot of people who, people in the sales fields. Actually, anyone who wants to communicate better. Sometimes it's in the guise of, being afraid to talk to other people or approach them or make speeches, presentations. But that actually does relate to the entire point that we don't want to focus on little tactical techniques, that kind of thing, because that's all about focusing on yourself consciously. When a person is actually doing those kinds of things, presenting, speaking, meeting other people, they actually want to direct their attention outwards and connecting with the other person, instead of thinking like, I have to watch, are they crossing their legs now? Are they looking this way? Are they looking that way? Because that's not very useful. But anyway, so I hope that's helpful to you, even if you're not a hypnotist, and if you're just interested in improving communication in any case. And so that if you have tried these kinds of techniques and they haven't really been that useful for you, maybe that's why, because those techniques need to be done unconsciously, need to be so ingrained in you unconsciously that if you try to do them, if you try hard to do those things in real life settings, they just that's not how it's supposed to work. Okay, well, I hope this was useful to you, and I'll see you later. Bye.